may have noticed that I limped a little as I was walking on stage. This morning, I woke up, my alarm was blaring out, and just to explain, I used to have an alarm clock by my bed, and it went ring, I go, shut up, shut up. And so I set up this system, and I used to be a scientist, so I love systems. I set up a system on my computer in the next room, so at an allotted time, it comes alive, and then it blares out Brazilian samba. Cool, so Brazilian samba was blaring out, and I got out of bed and went smack on the ground. And I hurt my lip, and then moments later I felt an excruciating pain in my back. But luckily I'm fine and I'm here. And afterwards, I realized how grateful I was for my health, which is usually so good, the health I have every day. And then I began to think about gratitude and how all of us forget how to be grateful for our health and the other amazing things in our life. And when we forget to be grateful, it's as though we're covering up a part of us in here. And when we're grateful, we uncover that. And it's as though we get that part of us back. And my talk today is all about labels. I'm obsessed with labels, and I'll explain why in a moment. But I want to say this: if you're anything like me, then you've been walking around sticking a label over a part of your heart, your passion, or your life. When I was younger, age 20, if you've been with me, you would have seen me hunched over a microscope, surrounded in electrical wires. I was in a darkened room for 3.5 years. I came straight out of Cambridge into my PhD. It all looked so impressive on the outside, so rational, so sensible. And yet inside, I wasn't fulfilled. In my spare time, I sat at my old computer. You remember the old computers from the late 90s? You know, those big beige things. Remember those? So I sat pounding away at the keys. I wanted to express my creativity, to use my gifts to make a difference in the world. And I wrote fiction stories, and I sent them off to magazines, and some of them got published, but most of my creative expression remained locked away on the hard drive. I came straight out of my PhD into the public sector, and I stayed there for more than 10 years of my life. Again, so sensible and rational. And all the time I was just trying to fit in. I was trying to do what was expected of me. And my creativity, which I couldn't even define, was just stifled. My dream was stifled. And then one day I became obsessed with labels. And do you get obsessed with things, or is it just me? Not any odd labels. I became fascinated with gender labels, and in particular, stereotypes and the way society makes assumptions about men and women being different, thinking differently, behaving differently, being different. And I used my neuroscientific background, and I read the evidence, and I talked to experts. And the more I read, the more it seemed to me that most of these stereotypes, these labels, were lies. Interesting. What I didn't expect was how this obsession was going to lead to a turning point in my life. So on the morning of the 13th of December 2011, I woke up to the sound of my mobile phone dancing on the bedside table beside me. I was being tweeted to by politicians. I was being texted to by journalists. And my name was mentioned on the Today programme. Yay! Oh, I had become the gender label expert. And what I'd done is I'd persuaded Hamleys, which is a big toy store, you may have heard of it, in central London, to scrap its gender labelling, so it no longer categorised, segregated girls' and boys' toys. It mixed them all up, opportunities for everyone. And this was amazing, right? But what was even more amazing was it was news all over the UK, and it was news all over the world. So the reports were coming in from France, from Germany, from the USA, from Australia, from Hong Kong. And then we'll see my first slide, the difference that was made, quite a radical difference. And what I began to notice was the amount of emotion that was behind this media and public response, the passion, the support, and the anger. Yes, there was a lot of anger. Some comments directed at me along the lines of, go back to the kitchen, love. That Dr. Laura doesn't get enough sex. And there was one dissenting article that I'm going to share with you now because it made me see this all in a new perspective. And it's also very eloquently written, as you'll see. So, the Irish Sunday Times had a column by Paddy Murray, and it went like this: sexist my arse. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say arse in a TEDx talk. There's a woman in England called Laura Nelson, and she's got all hot and bothered about gender labels. And so it went on. You can Google it if you're interested. And you know when someone accuses you of being hot and bothered, you're like, I'm not hot and bothered, I'm not, well, maybe I am hot and bothered. I am hot and bothered. Why? Why am I so hot and bothered? Why do I care so much about gender labels? And in that moment, it was as if a voice from deep inside of me came out. You know, that voice of wisdom that comes out and tells you the truth, tells you what you need to hear sometimes. And that voice said, Laura, the reason you care about the labels is because you've bought into the lies yourself. And I realized all my life, I tried to fit in. I'd done what was expected of me. All those stereotypes and labels and limitations, I've made them my own. When all the time it was me not feeling good enough. It was me stifling my own creativity, stifling my dream. What if you found out that everything you'd been told about your life was a lie? Well, there was no going back, there was only going forward, but what to do now? What was my dream? So I did something that I wouldn't have previously done. I went to see a coach. Now, I had stuck a label on a coach. You know, you only went to a coach if you had problems, right? So I had to admit that I had problems. That's the label I stuck on the coach. And more than that, you know, as a scientist, I wouldn't trust anything that wasn't backed up with rational facts and evidence. And this coach had the cheek to throw pseudoscience at me. You know, exercises like hypnosis. Someone has obviously got experience of hypnosis over there. It was the pseudoscience that saved my dream. So the coach, we did it over Skype, and she said, we're doing some hypnosis. And all hypnosis means, by the way, is you just get into a relaxed state and you let your imagination guide you. And she said, I want you to go into your imagination, visualize yourself 10 years from now. Land from outer space and come down and tell me what you see. So I did, and I came down from outer space, and what I saw was unexpected. I landed in the middle of the countryside. Undulating hills, woodland, flowers. I could smell the flowers and feel the summer breeze on my face. And there was a house. And I walked up the garden path into the house. And I stepped into the open doorway. And I felt at home, my home. I felt the comfort and the joy and the love and the belonging. And I walked around the rooms. The furniture was elegant. And I went into the study. This is where the magic happens. There was a magnificent mahogany desk. But what was striking was what was on the walls. Big sheets of paper as if they'd been ripped off from flip chart. And on these pieces of paper was what could only be described as mind maps. Scientists don't use mind maps. And I looked closely at these mind maps and I realized these were my creations. These were my ideas that I'd put into systems that I was going to go out and teach people with, train people, inspire people, motivate people to live their dreams. So I came out of the hypnosis and the coach said, well, how was that? And I said, well, I don't think that house is very near a tube station. Well, I didn't have to worry about the tube station because no more commuting. I quit my job. I had a new life. But what to do now? I mean, who spends their time making mind maps? Well, when I looked at more closely and more thoroughly, what I found was that there were people doing this, and they were trainers, and they might be standing on stages like this one, training audiences, helping people. And some of them had mind maps, some of them not. But what they all did was they packaged their ideas into a form with which they could use to teach people with, train people. And it was their expertise, whether it was happiness, health, or hairdressing. It didn't matter. They just managed to teach that and inspire people to transform their lives. And what I also noticed about these people, what they all had in common, is that they were all successful entrepreneurs. Now, most of us don't relate to the word entrepreneur. I certainly didn't. Entrepreneur, stuck a label on that. Not for me. Big business or something like that? No. By the way, it's not always about big business. But I said, no, that's not for me. But I ask you, what is you? Isn't it helping people? Isn't it using your gifts? Isn't it making a difference? Isn't it mastering your craft? Isn't it being of service? Isn't it making money from your passion? You don't even have to care about the money. I didn't. But what I realized was this, that entrepreneurship is the vehicle to a life of joy, fulfilment, and freedom. So I began to learn about entrepreneurship and business, and I hired many more coaches. And I learned from many other people's mind maps, and I started to create my own. And I started to train people one-to-one and then train people in groups. And I learned to speak on stages. And I train entrepreneurs now to start their own businesses, to create the life of their dreams. And I did most of this, not speaking on stages, of course, but most of it's from my own home. Because technology is so easy and so accessible now, it means we can do this. And I've told you my story, this is my passion, but you will have your own passion that's unique to you. And that's why I've called this movement the unlabelled entrepreneur, because it's all about you being yourself. And I believe that everyone has something to give. And the time is now. It's never been a better time to do it because the world is waiting for people to stand up with their message. And standing out, that's the key phrase, not fitting in. It's the labels that make you fit in. Allow me to give you a new label. Dare to stand out. Will you dare to stand out? You have amazing gifts inside of you. Can you be a leader? And you don't have to be on a TEDx stage or talk to large audiences. You can be a leader in your community, a leader in your niche. What do all leaders have in common? They've chosen the label of truth. They've chosen to stand out. And because of this, they are changing the world. Thank you.